Today we're blessed to welcome the Honorable Keith A. James, Mayor of West Palm Beach, whom it is my pleasure to introduce, to join us in these celebrations as our guest speaker. Mayor James's bio is impressive and extensive. So let me just share with you some of the highlights. He was born in Wichita, Kansas, to a teenage single mother, and he learned the value of hard work, service, and education at an early age. As a young man, Mayor James overcame the challenges of segregation and inequality to become accepted to and graduate from Harvard College and Harvard Law School. He was elected to be the chief executive of West Palm Beach in 2019, but prior to being elected, Mayor James served as district commissioner and past president of the Palm Beach County League of Cities. He was the former chair of the West Palm Beach Citizens Ethics Task Force, a position to which he was appointed by the then mayor and our sister Lois Frankel, and a former board member of the Florida League of Cities and chair of Leadership Florida and the Quantum Foundation. He was the first African-American chair of the Leadership Florida and Quantum Foundation, and he's Palm Beach County's fourth African-American mayor. Throughout his years of service in all these roles, he's been a champion of collaborative approaches for solving regional and state issues on equality, home rule, health and addiction challenges, and transportation. As mayor, he's dedicated himself to fulfilling his vision of a resident-driven West Palm Beach with neighborhood initiatives, regional collaboration, and community partnerships. As a member of the Mayor Keith A. James fan club, I could go on and on and on, but I know we're all much more interested in what thoughts Mayor James came to share with us on this Sisterhood Shabbat and Martin Luther King weekend. So please join me in welcoming West Palm Beach Mayor, Mayor Keith James.
Thank you very much for that introduction. I apologize, I didn't give you the abbreviated introduction, so I told my staff to give you the short one. Good morning, everyone. It is truly a pleasure to be before you this morning. My sincerest thank you to the Women's League of Temple Bethel President Marcy Adler and the Sisterhood Shabbat Committee for their invitation. It is truly an honor to have been invited to join you all on this Sabbath to commemorate Temple Bethel's Sisterhood Shabbat. Before I go any further, could you join me in giving these incredible women a round of applause for their dedication to the synagogue and our loyal community. You know, in my own life, I've been blessed with many strong, driven women who have each impacted me in different ways. Now, before I go any further, I'm going to apologize because whenever I start speaking about my mother, I get a bit emotional. And so I will warn you about that now. As was introduced in, or as was stated in my introduction, my mother was a single mother, single teenage mother. She actually had graduated from high school when she was 16 in a small town in Oklahoma called Cushing, Oklahoma. And she was well on her way to becoming the first person in her family to graduate from college when she moved from Cushing to Wichita, Kansas, which was the big city by her standards. She began college at Wichita State University. She met my father, who was probably the exact opposite of her. If you looked up bad boy in the dictionary, there was probably a picture of my dad. He was a high school dropout. He wore his cigarette pack in his t-shirt sleeve, which was the thing back then. And, you know, he was very good in the pool halls where he was known as a hustler. I don't know why this country girl from Cushing, Oklahoma was attracted to this bad boy in Wichita, Kansas, but nature took its course. And lo and behold, she got pregnant with me when she was 17. She ended up dropping out of college and began working as a maid to support us. But don't let those humble beginnings fool you. My mother was not about to let our circumstances dictate where we ended up in life. I'll tell you a quick story. Okay. I didn't do that, okay? Now we really have an issue. Is that better? Is that better? Okay. I'm not going to start over. Just pick up where I stopped. I'm going to tell you a quick story, and this story actually ties in to the theme of this short talk today. Toward the end of my third grade year in elementary school, I brought home a note from my teacher, and it was a note requesting my mother and I to appear at a meeting with the principal. Now, to a third grader, seeing such a note could cause tremendous shock and concern, and it did with me, because I didn't think I had done anything bad, but you never know. So my mother and I, we went to this meeting. And by the way, this was an all-black elementary school. This was before integration of schools had started in Wichita. And the principal started the meeting by telling my mother how smart I was, so I had a big smile on my face then, and that because of my performance on standardized tests, my mother had a choice. She had a choice to make about the future of my education. If I were to stay in the all-black school, I could skip a grade, and rather than going to the fourth grade, I could go straight to the fifth grade. The other option was I could be enrolled in what they then called an accelerated learning program, which we now call honors program, and stay in the same grade. But there was a catch. The catch was the closest school with this accelerated learning program was, surprise, surprise, an all-white school on the other side of town. Now, for reasons unbeknownst to me, my mother chose to send me to the all-white school. And when I say all-white, I mean literally all white. This was an elementary school, kindergarten through sixth grade, and I was literally the only black kid in the entire elementary school. As I mentioned, school integration had not yet started in Wichita. But as I look back, that was really an inflection point in my own life. It basically forced me to interact with and to compete with students performing at a much higher level, which in essence forced me to elevate my own game. And I look back, and I've asked my mother since, why did she choose option B, if you will? And my mother's reaction was, quoting her, "I just thought it was the right thing to do." So as I talk more about the other women in my life, I want you to keep this in mind. I just blank. I just thought, I just felt, I just believed. Hold that thought, put a pin in it, because I'm going to show you how this is all interwoven through the topic of today. My mother turned out to be the driving force, obviously, behind my academic career all the way through my high school years. If I brought home a B, she would immediately ask why it wasn't an A, and I'm sure there are mothers in the house, there generally was not a good enough reason for that from my perspective. My mother's support and guidance gave me the confidence to apply to Harvard College and the chutzpah, quite frankly, to attend once accepted. Thanks in large part to the discipline and values instilled in me by my mother, learning how to defer gratification. We had a rule in the house. I had to do my homework and chores before I was able to go outside and play with the other kids. The value of hard work and discipline. Another rule was I had to get home when the street lights came on. And you talk about discipline. If you're out playing with your friends, stickball or whatever the sport of the season was, and you happen to look up, you may be at bat, it may be a tied game in the bottom of the ninth, and you're the one at bat and got 2 strikes. But when those street lights came on, I had to have the discipline to walk away from the game. And of course, my mother taught me the value of good education. And because of those values, I enjoyed a fair amount of success as a corporate lawyer and municipal leader, and here we are today. But let's go back to that thought that I wanted to put a pin in. When I think about my mother's response to why she chose option B, it bespeaks of a deeper thought. Because if you think about it, what she was trying to do, and she probably didn't know at the time, was to position her son to branch out into the world, which she never fully explored. It basically speaks of a certain, shall we say, women's intuition. She just knew in her heart of hearts it was important to put me in that elevated level of competition. If you think about oppressed people, it's in our DNA to move higher and further than our circumstances might otherwise dictate. There's just something that we know. We don't necessarily know what it is to which we are ascribing, but we do know that we need to ascribe to those higher goals. And I think that was the thought that came through my mother. She probably didn't know how to articulate it as I just did, but she just felt in her heart of hearts, in her gut, her intuition told her that by moving me to this another level of competition, it would only serve me better, because it did not come without a personal cost to her. Again, they did not have busing in Wichita at the time, so that means that she had to get up earlier and drive me across town to school before she could get to her job as a maid in time. If there were activities after school, I had to learn, and she had to teach me how to deal with public transportation, figure out how to get a bus to get home. So that decision to move me or encourage me or to put me in this all-white school did not come without a cost. And so as we look at where we are today, as we celebrate Martin Luther King and the civil rights movement, that theme also carries through to the decisions of many leaders, certainly female leaders of the civil rights movement. They did not have a certainty as to what the new world would hold, but they had a desire and a commitment to moving us into the new world. You know, my instructions were to discuss women in my life. I've talked about my mother, and the same theme of, shall I say, desiring and aspiring to a better world carries through as I talk about the other 2 significant women in my life. The next woman I want to discuss is my amazing wife, First Lady of West Palm Beach, Lorna James, who is here with me today. Stand up, Lorna. Her story is that of the immigrants to our country. She immigrated to the United States with her family from the United Kingdom when she was 12 years old. Lorna majored in math at the University of Rochester, which is one of our country's leading engineering schools. And she accomplished this at a time when few women, and certainly even fewer black women, pursued a degree in math. Lorna is now a successful entrepreneur. She just recently opened her own business offices downtown. And fun fact, she was just on the cover of Palm Beach Society magazine as one of the 3 chairs of the upcoming Norton Gala. I could not be, yeah, you clap for that. She didn't know I was going to say that, by the way. I could not be prouder of her accomplishments and promising future. But let's go back to this theme of an intuitive desire to pursue something different, because if you think of the immigrant story, and I'm sure many of you out there have folks in your genealogical line who have immigrated to this country, and I suppose if you had the opportunity to ask them why they moved to America, I'm sure they would say to pursue hope, to pursue a better life. But I hearken back to that, we've all heard this line. A 1,000-mile journey always begins with the first step. But have you ever thought about what it takes to take that first step? Once you take that, when you make the decision to take that first step, there's no certainty that you will complete that 1,000-mile journey. In fact, when you take the first step, you may not even know that the journey is 1,000 miles, but what motivates you to take that first step to reach beyond your grasp for a better world is probably the same thing that motivated my mother to push me to go to the all-white school. She did not know whether I would succeed there, but she was forcing me out of my comfort zone, out of our comfort zone, and certainly those who immigrate to this country are also moving outside of their comfort zone for what they think is a better life. As I think about the decision my mother made, if you read my bio, you might think that the real turning point in my life was when I attended Harvard College and moved there to Cambridge from Harvard in 1979. But as I look back on it, the inflection point was really when I attended Meade Elementary School, the all-white school that I went to. Because what it did is it took me out of the comfort zone and it forced me to learn how to matriculate in a world which is a much bigger world than the one that my mother and I were experiencing at the time. It taught me to develop a certain skill sets that would be required for me to do what I'm doing today. Similarly with Lorna's family, when they moved here to the United States from England, yes, they had family members who were already in the United States, but still to take that step, to leave the comfort of the United Kingdom and whatever life that was they had there to pursue the uncertainty of life in America was a big step. Let me turn now to the third woman who is instrumental in my life, and that is my daughter, Amber. I have 2 kids. I have a 35-year-old son who is practicing law in New York, and my daughter, Amber, is 31, and she actually has more Harvard degrees than I do. She has 3. She graduated from Harvard College, and then she earned her law degree and business degree from Harvard. So I'm very proud of her. Amber has spent time abroad in China and is currently in South Africa to explore what business opportunities lie behind her home country. But while she was visiting South Africa, and she went there for a wedding a year ago. Inspiration struck when she was there. So she is now over there currently starting up in the beginning stage of establishing a wine vineyard there. Now, that may seem daunting, and it is, certainly as her father, but I don't express doubt when I'm with her because I'm her father and I need to instill in her confidence and courage. But she has proven her determination, but we go back to the theme. of being willing to explore a world outside of your personal comfort zone. And that's what my daughter is doing. She is truly the living embodiment of the phrase of don't be afraid to chase your dreams. And I am proud that I instilled in her that courage. There is a story that the African American community, religious community, and the Jewish community share, and I shared this with my daughter years ago, probably when she was about 18 or 19. She asked me, she said, Dad, how do I know what my purpose is in life? And I pondered that question. And as I began to write the email back to her, thoughts started pouring into my head, which flowed through my hands into the keyboard. I told her that you probably will never know the full story of what your purpose is, but it's important for you to be obedient to the guidance and direction that you are receiving from your God. And I reminded her of the story of the children of Israel as they were escaping slavery in Egypt. And you all may remember that they were sustained by manna from heaven. But there were specific instructions that came with that manna. And I use this as I wrote to my daughter, because that same direction, instructions, are basically in the model prayer over in the New Testament. The Lord's Prayer, we call it. Part of that prayer says, give us this day our daily bread. And so I tied those two themes together when I talked to my daughter. I said, listen, what you need to do is hear your instruction for that day. You all remember the story, manna. You collected all the instruction, or you collect all you can for that day, for you and your family to consume that day. If you got greedy and you tried to get more than that day, it spoiled, it rotted. And similarly, the instructions in the model prayer are that we are to pray for that daily bread. Seek our instruction each and every day. So I told my daughter, as she was, I said, listen, it may be that your purpose in life is to clear a forest of trees. If God dropped into your spirit that you are to clear the entire forest, then you would rely upon your own personal knowledge on how to do that. God may want you to chop down a tree a day or 5 trees a day, but if you knew that your goal was to chop down or to clear that whole forest, you would probably say, okay, let me go hire a group of guys to come do it, and we'll get it done in less time. But it is not the clearing of the forest that is the important thing. It is the heeding of the instruction. There are lessons to be learned from following God's instruction in our life on a daily basis. And if we get outside our lane, as the young folks say, we'll miss those lessons. So as my daughter is pursuing her dreams, I am hoping, and I encourage her to just make sure you are checking in with the man upstairs each and every day to know what your instructions are for that day. Now, it may not be that she will end up owning a vineyard. She thinks that is what her godly purpose is, and if it is, it is. But it's more the lessons that you learn from the obedience. So those 3 women are certainly important to me in my personal life. And now let's tie it in, because the other part of the instructions today were to talk about women in the civil rights movement. And if you all recall the time, the 60s, when African Americans were fighting for their rights, basic rights, as simple as the right to vote, the right to fair wages. It was a struggle, and I'm proud to say that many members of the Jewish faith stood shoulder to shoulder with African Americans as we were engaged in these battles, and I imagine that was because as Jewish people, they understood what it meant to be oppressed. And we welcome that partnership. But as we fought for those rights, there was no certainty that we would be successful in achieving it. But the many people who were fighting for a better life, all they knew at that time was that there had to be a better life. There was no certainty in the destination, but they knew they had to start the journey. There were many women who were leaders in the civil rights fight, and we must pay tribute to them today. Often they get lost in the story. Dorothy Height, who had been fighting for equity for African American citizens decades before the civil rights movement. Certainly Coretta Scott King, who stood beside her husband in his fight for equity and justice. And we all know the story of Rosa Parks and the stand she took against segregation. Rosa Parks is often portrayed as a woman who was coming home from work who was just tired, and that's why she wanted to sit in that seat. That is not the case. Rosa Parks was an activist. She knew exactly what she was doing, and the courageousness of her decision to sit in that seat should be part of her story. Daisy Bates, who was president of the NAACP's Arkansas chapter, who played a crucial role in segregation. We all recall the famous Little Rock Nine. 9 black students, many of them little girls, who entered an all-white school under the protection of federal troops. These and dozens of other women left their names etched in a pivotal moment in our nation's history, creating long-lasting impacts for generations to come. But it all goes back to seeking a better world, a world that they may never be able to realize, but they knew in their heart of hearts that that was their purpose, not to stay in their own comfort zone, but to venture outside their comfort zone to make the world a better place for others. Before I close, I want to recognize and extend my best wishes to Cantor Gaston Bogomoli. I apologize if I mispronounced that name, who is a new spiritual leader here at Temple Bethel. And I want to thank you all again for allowing me the opportunity to share a bit about myself and the beloved women in my life. Shabbat Shalom.